Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jordan Giesige, and this is The Limiting Factor. Tesla's just had its most positive quarter yet for the 4680 project. The positive news ranges from reaching 100 million cells produced to the 4680 battery pack that was teased for the Cybercab. But as you can see on screen, that's just the tip of the iceberg, and it all ties into Elon's comment from the Q3 earnings call that Tesla has a lot more ideas to go in terms of cost cutting. So let's not waste any time and get right into it. Before we begin, a special thanks to my Patreon supporters, YouTube members, and Twitter subscribers, as well as Rebellionaire.com. They specialize in helping investors manage concentrated positions. Rebellionaire can help with covered calls, risk management, and creating a money master plan from your financial first principles. Let's start with Elon's comment from last week's earnings call. He said, quote, "When you consider the fully landed cost of a battery pack in the US, net of incentives and duties, the 4680 is tracking to be the most competitive, meaning lower cost per kilowatt hour fully considered than any other alternative. We're not quite there yet, but we're close to being there, which I think is extremely exciting. And we've got a lot of ideas to go well beyond that. So I think if we execute well, the Tesla internally produced cell will be the most cost-competitive cell in North America." End quote. He also said, quote, "We'll continue to buy a lot of cells from our competitors. We're obviously increasing substantially our vehicle output and our stationary storage output, so we need a lot of cells, and most of them will still come from suppliers." End quote. Let's go through what Elon said, point by point. First, earlier this year, Lars advised that Tesla's goal for the 4680 was to beat the cost of high-nickel cells from third-party suppliers by the end of the year. Now, Elon's saying that Tesla's goal is to be lower cost per kilowatt hour than any alternative, and by that, he likely means not just nickel, but also LFP battery packs. On that note, to keep things simple, in this video, I'm going to just be focused on cell costs. There was one catch with Elon's statement, which was that he said net of incentives and duties. To understand the implications of that, let's take a look at a post from X by Lars that lays out the cost structure for battery cells when factoring in things like incentives and duties. Bear in mind, these are ballpark estimates, and the important thing here is relative cost rather than absolute cost. LFP battery cells from China for grid storage cost about $44 per kilowatt hour. The fully landed cost of those battery cells in the US, that is, including fees, duties, and shipping, is about $60 per kilowatt hour. If $60 per kilowatt hour is the cost point that Elon was referring to when he said lower cost per kilowatt hour than any alternative, it would mean Tesla's currently approaching a cell production cost for the 4680 of $95 per kilowatt hour. That's because Tesla should be getting US government incentives for domestic battery production of $35 per kilowatt hour. However, if the alternative Elon was referring to was automotive LFP battery cells rather than cells for grid storage, the cost target would be higher. That's because automotive LFP battery cells are more expensive than LFP battery cells used for grid storage. Let's say the automotive LFP cells cost $10 more per kilowatt hour, or $70 per kilowatt hour. If that's the benchmark Elon was referring to, then after adding $35 per kilowatt hour for the production tax credit, the 4680 would currently be approaching a cell production cost of $105 per kilowatt hour. And lastly, in my view, the most unlikely alternative that Elon may have been referring to was high-nickel battery cells for automotive use cases, which, as Lars points out, are up to $80 per kilowatt hour. As I said a moment ago, beating that price point was Tesla's original goal for the year. After taking into account the $35 per kilowatt hour production tax credit, that would have meant a production cost target for the 4680 team of up to $115 per kilowatt hour. So which cost did Elon have in mind? $95, $105, or $115 per kilowatt hour? Elon said that the 4680 was approaching the lowest cost of any alternative. If we take that literally, the 4680 is approaching a production cost of $95 per kilowatt hour. If we assume that he meant any alternative automotive cell, the 4680 is approaching a production cost of $105 per kilowatt hour. If that's correct, it means Tesla may have already beaten their original cost target goal for the year, which would have been around $115 per kilowatt hour for high-nickel battery cells. But if they haven't hit that production cost yet, they're doubtlessly close if Elon's now setting his sights on lower cost targets. Either way, if that's the case, the Cybertruck may already be or will soon be using 4680 cells that are cheaper than any alternative battery cells Tesla could have purchased from the likes of Panasonic or LG Chem. That's noteworthy because it's still early days for the Cybertruck ramp, which has already reached profitability, and this is the most that the 4680 cells are ever going to cost. That brings us to the most exciting thing that Elon said about cost, which is that, quote, "We've got a lot of ideas to go well beyond that," end quote. What could Elon mean by that? Let's bring in all the major reports and updates for the 4680 for the quarter, because they all relate to driving costs down. I'm going to blitz through these updates, but if you'd like more in-depth analysis, check out the description for links to in-depth summaries by myself and others on X. First, as Tesla announced at the last quarterly earnings call, they produced their first fully dry 4680 pack for the Cybertruck, and they were on track to launch production of the fully dry 4680 cell in Q4. As I said in the last quarterly update, it's unlikely that those battery cells reach volume production in Q4 because it'll be the beginning of the production ramp. Rather, it's likely to take several quarters before they hit volume production. When that does happen, it'll rapidly drive down the cost of cell production. That's because Tesla will be using cathode foils coated in-house rather than importing wet-coated cathode foils from Asia. What could the cost difference be? If fully landed cells from Asia incur about a 36% cost premium, let's apply the same premium to the wet-coated cathode foils. Given that the cathode makes up roughly 50% of the cost of a battery cell, we can cut the 36% in half for an 18% cost savings. So if the current 4680s cost around $115 per kilowatt hour, the fully dry cells would save about $20 per kilowatt hour and cost around $95 per kilowatt hour. The second piece of news to cover is that in September, Tesla announced that they produced their 100 millionth 4680 cell. I did a thorough analysis of that on X and showed that at that time, Tesla's 4680 run rate could be around 17 gigawatt hours per year. Given that Tesla has at least 100 gigawatt hours of 4680 production capacity installed in Austin, they're still at a very low utilization rate of around 17%. That means as 4680 production increases and they hit higher utilization rates, costs will drop. By how much, I don't know, but let's say around $25 per kilowatt hour. That's because 2 years ago, in the Q3 2022 earnings call, Elon advised that for fully integrated 4680 production, exclusive of the $35 per kilowatt hour production tax credit, Tesla was expecting to hit $70 per kilowatt hour at the cell level. By fully integrated, I'm assuming he meant vertically integrated cathode and lithium production. If that's correct, does that mean $70 per kilowatt hour without vertical integration is too low? In my view, no, because at the time that Elon made the $70 per kilowatt hour comment, cell costs were much higher because lithium prices were through the roof, which means Elon's estimate was likely factoring that in, and therefore on the high side. That means my estimate of $70 per kilowatt hour before vertical integration is probably in the right ballpark. If that's correct, it means in the next year or two, if production goes well, Tesla may be able to produce high-nickel battery cells for the same price that they purchase automotive LFP battery cells imported from China. But we're not finished yet. The next report from the third quarter was from Joe Tegmeyer, who captured images of equipment for the cathode production line at Giga Austin. To be clear, this is the manufacturing line that'll convert raw materials like nickel and lithium into cathode powder, not what we were discussing earlier, which was coating that cathode powder to the electrode foils. Once that cathode line is running at full tilt, as per battery day, it'll save Tesla about 12% on the cost of their battery cells. If we assume Tesla's cost benchmark at the time of battery day was a cell cost of about $90 per kilowatt hour, 12% would mean a savings of about $10 per kilowatt hour. Subtract that from the $70 per kilowatt hour figure, and the result is $60 per kilowatt hour. While we're on the topic of raw materials, the fourth update from the third quarter was a set of images posted by Alex Torville that were from Joe Tegmeyer and Tesla's slide deck, which showed the progress of Tesla's lithium refinery in Corpus Christi over the past 3 months. That lithium refinery is nearly complete and will hopefully start production in 2025. And when it hits volume production, it should reduce the cost of Tesla's battery cells by 1 to 2%. That's obviously not a huge impact, but every dollar matters. If the lithium refinery can knock $1 off the cost of Tesla's battery cells, the estimated cell cost drops to $59 per kilowatt hour. The fifth report from the third quarter was from Steve Levine of The Information, who reported that Tesla's working on 4 new battery cells for a launch by 2026. One of those cells was referred to as a workhorse cell, which, in my view, is likely going to use an LFP chemistry. If Tesla developed their own in-house LFP 4680 cell, that could knock another $10 off the cost of the 4680, which would put the final tally for a fully integrated LFP 4680 cell at about $49 per kilowatt hour. Given that LFP cells are currently being sold in China for $44 per kilowatt hour, is $49 per kilowatt hour too conservative? In my view, no, and that's for several reasons. First, those cells are likely being sold at a loss because there's currently a glut of battery cells in China. Second, China's been developing their gargantuan battery supply chain for decades. It's heavily subsidized, and almost everything, including labor, is cheaper in China. Third, Tesla's 4680 would be for an automotive use case rather than grid storage. And, as I said earlier, LFP cells for grid storage are about $10 per kilowatt hour cheaper. So, adjusting for losses, scale, subsidies, local costs, and use case, the LFP cells currently being sold in China would cost far more than the $49 per kilowatt hour I'm suggesting for Tesla. With that said, it's worth pointing out that it's going to be several years, probably after 2027, before Tesla hits the $49 per kilowatt hour cost target, because it's going to take them time to scale and maximize the yield rates of their factories. And in the meantime, Chinese companies will also be riding down the cost curve to push beyond the current record low prices of $44 per kilowatt hour. While we're on the topic of LFP, let's move on to the sixth report from the third quarter. Tesla's advertised a role for a senior cell materials engineer for LFP cathode. That is, they're building a talent pool for battery cells that use LFP cathode material. That doesn't necessarily confirm the widely speculated LFP 4680 cell, but it does lend that speculation some credibility. It also leads us to the last 4680 related news from the third quarter. Tesla teased that the Cybercab would use a 4680 cell. In my view, an LFP 4680 would be perfect for that vehicle. I've done several videos that tangentially covered LFP 4680s for the Cybercab, but I'm still getting a lot of questions on the topic, so I may have to do a dedicated video. In the meantime, in short, I expect that an LFP 4680 battery pack with no silicon or manganese doping would have the worst energy density of any next-generation LFP battery pack in the industry. However, the Cybercab won't need a high-energy density battery pack because it'll only have around 200 miles of range, and I expect that an LFP 4680 pack could provide that. What's more important for the Cybercab would be other features like lower production cost, safety, and long cycle life due to better thermal management. And for those requirements, I expect the LFP 4680 would be the best option available to Tesla, even in comparison to the CATL Qilin and BYD Blade battery packs. Yes, Tesla could use a high-nickel 4680 that incorporates Jeff Dahn's million-mile battery formulation, and that would cut roughly 50 kilograms of weight or more from the vehicle, making it more efficient. But it would increase the production cost of the robotaxi and complicate the supply chain. So it's definitely an option, but less likely than using an LFP-based cell. Finally, Elon's third point from the earnings call was that Tesla has aggressive plans to grow their vehicle and stationary storage business, and that most of their battery cells will continue to come from third-party suppliers. That is, at this point, the 4680 ramp isn't yet positioned to support the concurrent ramp of multiple new battery packs for new products. It'll likely get there in the next 2 to 3 years, but I imagine if they do use the 4680 for new battery packs in the next year or so, that it'll happen sequentially, product by product. For example, early to mid next year, when the Cybertruck ramp is starting to plateau, the 4680 lines could start supporting the ramp of new battery packs for a reshuffle of the trim packages for the Model 3 and Model Y lineup. Then, after that, start gearing up for a ramp of battery packs for the Tesla Semi and/or Cybercab in 2026. In summary, production is going strong on the 4680 lines that are producing cells with the wet-coated cathode, and Tesla's optimistic about the ramp of the fully dry 4680, which is expected to begin this quarter. However, the fully dry cell will likely take several quarters to hit its stride. Furthermore, as we've seen in the past, cell manufacturing can throw up unexpected difficulties, so it could be worthwhile for the Tesla investor community to ask for updates on the 4680 ramp at the next earnings call. Either way, in the meantime, Tesla's still at low utilization rates for their 4680 factory at Giga Austin. So even without the dry cathode, they could continue writing down the cost curve to produce cells that are cost competitive to third-party alternatives. Beyond the 4680 production line, the cathode factory is coming together at Austin, and the lithium refinery is coming along at Corpus Christi, both of which should further reduce costs when they hit volume production in the next year or two. Lastly, the most exciting thing to look forward to is new cell chemistries that offer lower costs, higher performance, or both, which can be used in new products and vehicle trims. I covered just one of the potential new chemistries earlier in the video, LFP, but if the reports from the information are correct, we could see 3 more chemistries in the next 2 to 3 years, including a lower-cost nickel-based chemistry and a higher-performance silicon-doped chemistry. That is, Tesla may be positioning themselves to deliver on the chemistries they teased at Battery Day. As always, I'll keep you updated on a quarterly basis, and in the meantime, I'm looking forward to sharing my upcoming videos on wireless charging, CATL's Shunxing battery, and nuclear power. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting the channel by using the links in the description. Also, consider following me on X. I often use X as a testbed for sharing ideas, and X subscribers like my Patreon supporters generally get access to my videos a week early. On that note, a special thanks to Aaron the Shrubber on X for your generous support of the channel, as well as my YouTube members, X subscribers, and all the other patrons listed in the credits. I appreciate all of your support, and thanks for tuning in.